So in Proverbs 23:7, it says, "For as he thinks in his heart, so is he." What a profound and timeless truth. As I think in my heart, I am. I think that's a really interesting combination of concepts. Thinking, meaning our mental energy, and heart, meaning our emotional energy. As we combine our mental energy and our emotional energy, we create who we are. For as he thinks in his heart, so is he. So let's just deconstruct that for a minute. You know, if you've been in religious science, and that's the name of the philosophy we teach here, religious science, if you've been here for more than a minute, you know that we teach that our thoughts are created. Our thoughts are created. That if we can change our thoughts, if we can change what we think about, we can change our lives. If we change how we think about things, we can change our lives. It's such a basic spiritual concept that is obviously ancient if it was written about in the Bible centuries ago, in the Old Testament to boot, so really a long time ago. Pretty old wisdom. Pretty old wisdom. And we know this to be true. We know it to be true. If someone has a positive mental attitude, and he combines that with a positive emotional quality, those are pretty popular people. Those are pretty powerful people. They're pretty much a positive force in the world. And people enjoy being around someone with a positive mental outlook as well as a positive emotional quality. On the flip side, if someone is always pessimistic and is often exhibiting emotional upset, they're pretty much, we know, we kind of avoid those people. We make a wide berth around them. You know, what you send out comes back to you. It's reflected in the people around you and the circumstances around you. So our founder, Ernest Holmes, almost 100 years ago wrote this: "When the time comes that nothing goes forth from you, then that which you would be glad to have returned, then you will have reached your heaven." It's one of his famous quotes. And this matches up with the verse in Proverbs, "As he thinks in his heart, so is he." Whatever goes forth from you and your thinking and your feeling becomes your life expression. And the other thing that we all know is that, with the exception of characters that are cast in a theatrical piece or something like that, most of us are complicated. We're a mixture of positive and negative, aren't we? We're both happy and we're sad. We're both loving and we're fearful. And we send out a mixture of things from us. And our lives reflect that mixture of things coming back towards us. Not exactly the heaven that Ernest Holmes talks about or describes, because we're sending out a lot of unheavenly stuff. So can you relate to being mixed like that, right? So how do we harness the power of this ancient wisdom for our lives? How do we take our mixed up nature and zero in on what Holmes suggests, which is to send out nothing other than that which we would be glad to have returned? How do we reach our heaven? I think that we go back to what Proverbs says, and we combine our mental energy and our emotional energy, and we work with setting powerful intentions. Let's see if that makes sense. So what we believe is that thoughts become things. Anything that has ever existed has first existed as an idea or a thought. All demonstrations first begin as a thought. Anything that you've ever created in your life, think about it. Anything you've ever created in your life, you first thought about it. You first thought about it. And the more focused your thought, the more powerful it is. And when we infuse that focused thought with our emotional energy, such as anticipation or excitement or dread or worry, those thoughts become even more powerfully charged, powerfully creative. And this is happening all the time, whether we're aware that it's happening or not. Ernest Holmes says, man's thought is creative because his thought is God power flowing through his individual will and imagination. We're going to talk about the word imagination. Our thought is creative, but human beings tend to use our creative power kind of willy-nilly, kind of by default, and not necessarily mindfully. And I told you last week that we're going to talk about mindfulness this month. That's the theme this month. Mindfulness is where our power lies. And working with intentions is how we focus our mindfulness in the creative process. Mindful intentions create a clear path for definitive and measurable demonstrations. If we want something and we want it intentionally, then that's how we creatively use that spiritual process. Mindful intentions activate our individualized will. That Holmes says the power of God, the God power flows through our will. So if we're going to mindfully create our lives, we have to pay attention to what we intend. If we don't want to create our life or our experience by default, then our intentions need to be nurtured with awareness, with faith and practice. We have to be mindful of what's going on within us. So you remember what I said at the beginning of the service, that we promote greater self-love through conscious living. We love ourselves more when we are awake and aware. In other words, we will love ourselves and we will love our lives more when we are more aware of who we are and what we are thinking and what we are feeling and what we are intending. We're going to love ourselves and our lives more. We love ourselves more when our lives look the way we want them to look. And we are co-creating our lives, so let's become more aware of what we're creating. In this book called As a Man Thinketh, James Allen writes this: they themselves are makers of themselves by virtue of the thoughts which they choose and encourage. That mind is the master weaver, both of the inner garment of character and the outer garment of a circumstance, and that as they may have hitherto woven in ignorance and pain, they may now weave in enlightenment and happiness. So it's not just our spoken word that has power. Every thought is a prayer, and our minds weave this inner garment of our character, who we are, and our outer garment of our circumstances, what we experience. We can weave in ignorance, or we can weave in mindfulness, and we have free will to do that. So Ernest Holmes says that we manifest from the tendency of our thoughts. So what do our thoughts tend? How do we tend to go in our thoughts? If we pay attention mindfully to our thoughts and our underlying intentions, we can clarify the tendency of our thought, where our thoughts are kind of going, and we can demonstrate the good that we choose. So what good do you choose? I think if we go back to James Allen's quote, our good falls into those two things, those two garments that we weave, those two categories. Who do we want to be, and what do we want to experience? So who do you want to be? Who do you want to be? What is the character that you want to weave as your inner garment? If you ask that question to most people, I think the answer would be pretty much the same. Who do you want to be? But let's take a second and answer that question. If you have a notepad, you can write it down. Who do you want to be? Write down a word or two, or just think for yourself. Who do you want to be? I'm going to predict that if you took a second to come up with a word, it's going to be something like, I want to be a good person. I want to be loving and generous and positive, and I want to be impactful. I want to be kind. I want to be fearless. I want to be generous, intelligent, attractive. Some of those words are what's going to come in to what you want your character to be. As we move about in this time of social unrest, those are the words. Those are who the world needs us to be. So it's good to know what our character is. So if you have a few words about who you want to be, the question becomes, how do you intend to live as that kind of a person? How can you make this your intention? How can you send forth from you that quality that you named, or that word? How can you set an intention to be known as that word? How can you start behaving as if you already are that word? How can you send forth that word and not the opposite of that word? So let me give you a personal example. Several years ago, I was taking a class and a course in abundance, so similar to the course in abundance that I teach around here. And in that course, I heard a phrase, and it said, become the most generous person you know. Become the most generous person you know. Generous is who I wanted to be. I wanted to be generous. It became my intention. So as one of the class projects in that class, I made a list of 101 things, 101 ways that I could be generous. So think about the word that you chose for yourself and think about how could you be that in 101 different ways. So my list of generosity was 101 ways that I could be generous. It included giving my time, including giving my talent. It did include giving my money or my treasure to the world around me. And that 101 ways was very diverse. It was everything from, treating friends to lunch, or being the one that I offered to drive, or taking care of more children than just my own anytime I had Kelsey around. It included so many different things, all the way to get to 101. But then I began to intentionally think thoughts about generosity. I began to feel the feelings and the emotions of generosity. I would choose the acts of generosity, seek out ways to be generous almost constantly. I began to surround myself with friends and other people, colleagues, who allowed generosity to be their kind of guiding principle. It was who I wanted to be, and I knew that it was going to require a very strong intention if I was going to become known as a generous person. So every time that I had a thought of the opposite of that, every time I had a thought of fear or lack or fear of rejection, right, or uncertainty or withholding, I turned back to my intention and I started being generous again anyway. If I had the opportunity to be generous, I stepped forward to be that person. But it takes discipline and consistency to keep stepping forward into it. So I sent out from me consistently what I wanted to receive, which was my heaven. So that's my example, but how do you take your word? How do you take your word and intentionally become that word? So make it your intention. Because remember, as he thinks in his heart, so is he. So you can find out who you are and who you think you are by looking around your life, by the people who you surround yourself with, by the boundaries and priorities you set for yourself. It's going to teach you who you are. So that's the first category of who do you want to be, your first category of good, that inner garment. But how do we weave that outer garment about the experiences that we want to have? Whatever experiences that you deeply believe are possible for you are the experiences that you are having. If you're not having an experience that you really want, either you don't believe it is possible, or you've planted a seed that simply hasn't yet broken the surface yet, and you have to know the difference for that for yourself. So I ask in the basic spirituality class, what do you want? What do you want? And the students write down their answers. What do I want? And we discuss the reality that you probably don't have that thing because you've chosen something else more than you've chosen that thing. So people write down in the class they want a life partner, or they want some material possession or a life experience that's somehow eluding them. And when we start talking about an example or two in the class, we find that instead of a life partner, they've been valuing and clinging to ideas of unworthiness or fears of connection, or claiming that being single is far more simple than being partnered. Or instead of wanting a car, instead they've been choosing experiences for their family or whatever. Or instead of moving to the new city, they've been choosing to cling to the situations where they are right now and the people where they live right now instead of taking the chance to move. So once we begin to look beyond the experience they say they want, and they begin to see that they've actually been giving mixed messages. So most of us can identify a dream for our lives, but we often leave it in the dream category, never really believing in the possibility of experiencing whatever that is. What I have found to be true is that when a person sets a clear, focused, mindful, unwavering intention about an experience they want to have, and they choose that one thing above all others over and over again, and they refuse to indulge in thoughts or emotions or fear about the opposite of that thing will happen. What I've also found to be true is that it is more powerful to name the quality behind the thing. So name the quality of life that you want to have behind the object or the person or whatever the situation. So if you say, I want a partner, then you look for the quality behind that will be love and belonging. Or if you're wanting a vacation to Greece, then perhaps the quality behind that is adventure or freedom. Or a new job, it could behind that be abundance and resources or purpose. So find the quality behind the thing that you say you want. So I like to say that when you create a pure and direct channel towards something, especially a quality of the divine, the universe floods that channel with energy, and the possibility becomes reality. It might not look exactly like you thought it would, but you can expect that experience will be yours. Because your mind is the most powerful instrument in the universe. You have the divine gift, the gift of imagination. Holmes talks about imagination being fire from heaven. When we use our imagination, along with mindful intentions, we're combining that mental and heart energy that we talked about at the beginning. So it's right and perfect for you to have a dream, but underneath that dream, there's got to be steps of creating intentions, of experiencing the dream. The imagination is how we kind of flesh out the details of our intended experience and how we communicate within ourselves about that. You get to write or rewrite your own story. You can become the master of your own experience by creating mindful intentions to create the life that you want. And if you look around your life and you're not exactly satisfied with it, just remember you intended that, or that, or that, or that. You may not have realized you were using your creative power, but you were, and you can rewrite your story. Henry David Thoreau said, "Live the life you have imagined." So take some time this week to become mindful about the good you desire in your life and return to those two basic questions. Who do I want to be, and what do I want to experience? Return to those two questions and begin to mindfully consider the answers you come up with. The most important step becomes writing intentions for yourself. Write intentions for yourself. My intention is to be blank. My intention is to regularly experience whatever it is. My intention is to have blank. My intention is blank. Intentions are so powerful. If intentions matter to you, if that's interesting to you, I'll quote from the same book that Barley quoted from, Wayne Dyer's The Power of Intention. Because he says so many powerful things. The whole book is fabulous. He says you get what you intend to create by being in harmony with the power of intention, which is responsible for all of creation. And he goes on to say, when you're connected to the power of intention, where everywhere you go and everyone you meet is affected by you and the energy you radiate. He's talking about what Ernest Holmes said, what you send out from yourself, what you radiate. As you become the power of intention, you'll see your dreams being fulfilled almost magically. And you'll see yourself creating huge ripples in the energy fields of others by your presence and nothing more. Dyer is talking about exactly what the verse in Proverbs said. When you combine your thinking and your emotion, your energy becomes creative. And you radiate out what you draw back into yourself. As you think in your heart, you are. As religious scientists, we have spiritual tools for personal and global transformation, and we use these tools to train our minds and to actualize and activate the power that is already within us. Setting a powerful and mindful intention is the first step to bringing forth demonstrations. It is how thoughts become things. What intentions will you set for yourself? We have an affirmation to read together. My intentions are clear and powerful as I weave my character and my circumstances.